Ugh, it's February, it shouldn't be this hot. You may be noticing that the fender flares are off. Finally ended up breaking pretty much 90% of all these tabs. Still have the fender flares, but I'm gonna have to find some other solution to bolt it back into these. So I put undercoating on this side, which is finally a good idea. Cut out a whole bunch more of the fender liner. Still working with zip ties to keep it in place. There's kind of nothing really holding this. I cleared out the snorkel for the intake. You might remember that before there was a giant windshield wiper fluid tank, which I have actually finally deleted. Left and right side of the subframe is now totally empty, and I can use that to put bigger tires on this when I get control arm spacers to move it out and forward. That's what's going on. I'm gonna turn my wheel back the right way around. I may have mentioned it before, but the ride is a little bit rough in the back since I've got the lift. It is the shocks that are limiting it. The bottom of the fender here to the center of the wheel is about 18.25. So now the tire is lifted completely off the ground, and if I put this up to the bottom of the fender here and measure to this, we're looking at about 19.5. For those of you who are not good at the math at home, that is 1.25 inches of downward travel for a off-road spec vehicle. That's just not gonna cut it. So I was originally looking at just getting new longer shocks, but that ended up being a little bit of a pain. I contacted another person on the forums, but he needed a shock absorber solution too. So he found these shock strut extenders. You thread this on top of it and it bolts up, and it basically acts as like a 2-inch spacer. I bought myself a torque wrench. Good investment, because now everything is just easier. You don't even understand. Like, if you need a 1/2-inch drive torque wrench to be able to do anything on a car. That's why I need to jack up the cars, because I need to unbolt, or I need to loosen this bolt before I loosen that bolt, then drop it back down to the ground, and it's a whole thing. I mean, it's not that complicated, but that's what I'm gonna be doing right now. Okay, and so I just thread this thingy on. I said I thread this thingy on. For the love of fuck, did I get the wrong one? This is coarse thread. After I did all that research to find out what? But I took this nut and it's the wrong fucking thread. But I took this to Lowe's, to the thread checker, and it said 3/8 24. That makes no goddamn sense. I took this into Lowe's and it went all the way on, which means their thread checker is wrong. Okay, well that's annoying, because that means I have to reinstall the shocks. Maybe I could go to Napa. Maybe Napa will have it. I'll do that real quick. Also, the crazy thing about the amount of lift that's on here is that the springs are pushing the control arms down so far that the top of the shock doesn't even come through here. So that's actually, I'm maxing out my jack right now. This would also explain probably why the ride is so stiff, is because the shock is constantly trying to rip itself out of the vehicle. Okay, so Napa had them. I had to drive like an hour to the downtown store. I've only ever seen 2 options for these in the half hour of research I did on them. The 3/8 24-inch fine thread and the 3/8 16 thread. This didn't work. So I was like, okay, it's coarser than this. Well, I can tell you just from looking at it that this is way too coarse now, and it will not thread on top of this. Nope, it just won't. I've come to the conclusion that if it's not 24 and if it's not 16, then it must be a 20 thread. And I've never seen 3/8 20 thread shock extenders. So I'm gonna have to hit up Nismo Off-Road and ask him what the hell, why, where the fuck did he get 20 thread? Cause I'm like 30 bucks in the hole on these at this point. It's actually kind of annoying. I figured this would be quick and simple. Just, you know, pop the shocks off, put these on top of it, and then pop them back on. Would have been good. My car would be riding super smooth. But this is the reason why I hate making videos. It's stupid garbage like this, like trying to figure out the right goddamn thread for your fucking hardware, and then I come out the other end looking like an idiot. Or like I start something, realize I don't have the tools to do it. 2 fucking bolts. And then I end up not making the video because I get halfway through and I'm like, well, this video won't complete. So to be continued. Okay, I don't remember where I left off on these. I got these, the 3/8 24-inch shock extenders. Tried to thread them onto the shock. They don't shut up. So I went down to the local hardware store, tried to find a 3/8 20 bolt or a nut or something so I could test it, and lo and behold, I could not find a 3/8 20 anything to save my life. I was thinking, well, it's a vehicle from overseas, from Japan. Well, what if the shocks are metric? Well, that's a bit of a stretch. So I'm thinking it's 3/8 20. What's the closest thing to 3/8? Well, the closest thing to 3/8 of an inch is 10 millimeters. 3/8 of an inch is about 9.5 millimeters. The closest thing to 20 thread would be a 1.25 pitch for a metric bolt. So the hardware store did actually have this thing. This is a 10 millimeter 1.25 nut, and what's interesting about it is when I went to screw it on, and it was just slightly loose, which led me to believe that I was correct in assuming that it was 3/8 and that it must be 3/8 20. But I've already got this hardware here, and they don't make these in 3/8 20. So what could I possibly do? Well, I hit up Lowe's, and they sent me a package, and inside that package was a black Kit Kat bar. But what, instead of the nice wafer filling, what's inside this Kit Kat bar is a 3/8 20 tap. So I'm gonna take this 16 and just tap it out to 20, and then this will work. And I can show you what I meant. Is this gonna work? Aha, see? This is a metric. I can screw it on here. Yeah, this is good quality YouTube content right here. But you can see it's just, it's ever so slightly loose, which means that 3/8 is the right one. I'm a little bit concerned about how on some of these it's going to be cutting straight through the thread. So I'm worried about structural integrity, but I'm hoping that there's enough meat on these threads so that tapping through them won't be an issue. And that's why I'm not going with these, because I don't think there's enough. It's way too fine of a tooth. So I feel like these are going to retain more of the structural rigidity better than the 24s. I feel like this clip has gone on way longer, and I'm sort of just rambling at this point. Yeah, dude, this thing is fucking tapped. This is either going to, I can either say that this has been ruined, and it'll thread onto the shock, and it'll probably ruin the shock. But I'll have shock extensions for a little bit, and I can see how well that works. Wow, I definitely tapped this. It's a little bit off center there. I was vastly underestimating the amount of thread that would still be left over on this. It's only 4 off. I guess every 1/4 of an inch the threads overlap. The cool thing about this is that it actually still works with 16 thread, and it also works with 20 thread. So that's really interesting. So I didn't ruin these at all. I just rethreaded them, and now they just have 2 overlapping thread patterns, which is very interesting. So this has turned out to be pretty much the hardest thing in the world to thread on. It seems like the thread is correct, but it's still just like really, really tight. It's got like a little over a 1/4 inch of thread, and it's like, this is like, even with 2 vice grips, I can just barely get it to turn. So I'm pretty sure that's not coming off there, but I just gotta remember it's only gonna be like a 1/4 inch of thread on there, but I feel like that's gonna be fine. The opening here goes on this thing, right? And then this is the same I made it too long. Whatever. It goes on here, and this goes on there, and bushing and everything goes on top of that. Okay, so I've hit my first snag. There's a little tab at the top that you can use pliers to keep the shaft from spinning. This doesn't have that, and the fact that I went through all the effort to make sure the shock boot goes all the way up to the top of the shaft makes it really difficult to get at the bottom of this bolt. Okay, it looks really dumb, even though this is exactly what they're designed to do. I have the strut extensions in. It only took me 1,000,000 years. I say that they're designed for this. I was tightening these, the one on this side down. That one went on just fine. I tightened it, and I'm like, I'm not sure if it's tight enough, and I put, it was like something abysmally small, like 30 foot-pounds or something, and it just snapped it clean off. So thankfully I had 2 sets of these, and I tapped out the 24 thread one, so it was all good in the end. I had to buy new bolts, but they're both on, and the ride is perfect. Well, you might notice, here's a bonus, taillights. What are they doing in the back of the car? Well, guess what? I got new ones from the 2015 and newer models. This one I got off a guy on the forums that had a crack in it. In fact, you can barely even see it on camera, which is awesome. I just epoxied it back together, used a little super glue, had to take the lens off, buff it out, clean it, put it back on with the Morimoto butyl rubber, whatever it's called. But yeah, I got them. The reason that these are cool is because they have LEDs going all the way up here, which these ones do not. It is only lit from here, here, and here. So it's kind of a waste, honestly, these. The only thing I like better about these is that the housing is red. I actually am not a big fan of the clear housing, and also these are just sharper, and I really like the silhouette of those better. I mean, this one still kind of has that sort of pokiness to it, but it is like just overall softer. And come on guys, I want to be as edgy as possible. And you can just barely see these. It's actually way better now because it's 4 p.m. and it's getting late. Actually, it's probably 5 now. But yeah, LEDs. Alright, just gotta add these to the pile. This is becoming a pretty big pile.